Ayaan sat behind the wooden counter of his small bookshop, flipping through the yellowed pages of an old poetry book. The shop was quiet, just the sound of the rain tapping softly against the window. Outside, the streets of the small town were empty. Gray clouds had taken over the sky, and the cold wind made people stay inside. But Ayaan didn't mind the silence. He loved rainy days. They brought a special peace to his heart. The smell of old books mixed with the fresh scent of rain was comforting. His shop, Chai and Chapters, was not just a place to buy books, it was a place to slow down. There was a kettle in the corner always ready to make chai, and a soft couch near the back where regulars sat and read. Ayaan looked up as the doorbell rang. A gust of cold wind came in with a woman who hurried inside, her scarf flying behind her. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her black hair was wet at the edges. She looked around, trying to catch her breath. "I'm so sorry," she said, laughing softly. "It just started pouring, and this was the first open door I saw." Ayaan smiled. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like. The rain doesn't look like it'll stop soon." She looked around with curious eyes, walking slowly between the shelves. Her fingers brushed lightly over the book spines, as if she was trying to feel their stories. She was wearing a yellow kurta with small blue flowers, slightly damp now, and she had a calm, graceful way of moving. "This place is lovely," she said. "It smells like old paper and chai." "That's exactly what it smells like," Ayaan said with a grin. "Can I get you a cup?" Her eyes lit up. "Really? I won't say no to that." Ayaan went to the kettle, poured hot water over tea leaves, and added just the right amount of ginger and cardamom. He brought her a steaming cup in a small ceramic mug. She took it with both hands and closed her eyes as she took the first sip. "Perfect. Just what I needed. Thank you." "Ayaan," he said. "I'm Zoya," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Ayaan." They both sat down on opposite chairs near the front window, the rain still falling outside like music. "Do you read a lot?" Ayaan asked. "All the time," Zoya said. "My father had a collection of books at home. I used to steal them from his shelf and read them at night with a flashlight. That's how I first fell in love with stories." Ayaan smiled. "That's a nice way to fall in love." She looked at him with soft eyes. "And you? Have you always been surrounded by books?" He nodded. "My parents passed away when I was in college. This shop was their dream. I kept it alive even when things got hard. Books are like family to me now." There was a quiet moment between them. Not heavy or sad, just peaceful. They sipped their chai and watched the world outside blur in the rain. Zoya leaned forward and picked up a book from the nearby table. "Ah, Fouise," she said. "My favorite." Ayaan raised an eyebrow. "Fouise Ahmed Fouise? A woman after my own heart." She smiled. "I know all his poems by heart." "Want test me?" Ayaan laughed. "Okay. Recite your favorite." Zoya sat back, eyes shining, and began to speak in a soft, melodic voice. "Fulan main rang bear badinavahar chil. Chail bieo kigel shunka karabar chail." The words filled the room like a warm light. Ayaan watched her, completely still, as if something magical was happening. Maybe it was. When she finished, she looked at him and said, "Your turn." Ayaan was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I don't think I can follow that." Zoya chuckled. "That's okay. You made great chai. That counts." They both laughed, and Ayaan felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't just the way she looked, though she was beautiful. There was something in the way she spoke, the way she smiled like she'd known him for years. Time passed quickly. They talked about books they loved, authors who broke their hearts, dreams they had as children. Zoya told him she was a travel writer, passing through the town to write about an old fort nearby. "I didn't expect to find a bookshop like this," she said. "I thought I'd just grab a photo or two of the fort and leave. But now, I don't know, this place makes me want to stay a little longer." Ayaan looked at her carefully. Maybe that's how all good stories begin. With a delay. A little rain. A change in plan. Zoya smiled again, this time softer. The rain finally started to slow. The sky turned a lighter gray, and the streets outside glistened with fresh water. Zoya stood and wrapped her scarf around her shoulders. I should go, she said, almost like she didn't want to. Ayaan stood too. You can come back anytime. We have more chai. More fuis. She nodded, walking to the door. I just might take you up on that. As she opened the door, she turned back one last time. Thank you, Ayaan. For the tea. And the company. Then she stepped out into the street, her yellow kurta bright against the wet gray world. Ayaan stood at the window, watching her walk away. There was something about the way her presence lingered, like the scent of rain on dry earth. He didn't know much about her yet, but he felt something real had just begun. The door closed slowly, and the bell gave a soft ring. Ayaan looked at the chair where she had been sitting, the empty chai mug still warm. He smiled to himself. Maybe this was the story he didn't see coming. The next day, the rain was gone, but the memory of it remained fresh in Ayaan's mind. He opened the shop like usual, dusted the shelves, arranged the books, and made chai. But this time, he found himself looking at the door more than usual. Each time the bell rang, his heart beat a little faster, hoping it might be her. It was late afternoon when Zoya walked in again. This time, the sun was shining behind her, making her look like a painting come to life. She smiled as she stepped inside, the same easy smile that had stayed with Ayaan all night. Hello again, she said, her voice warm. You came back, Ayaan replied, trying not to sound too happy. Of course, she said. I owed you another Foy's poem. Ayaan laughed and motioned to the same chair by the window. And I owe you another cup of chai. From that day on, Zoya became a part of the shop's rhythm. She came almost every day. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening. She never said she was coming, and Ayaan never asked. But somehow she always appeared, like a favorite chapter in a book you want to read again and again. She didn't always buy books. Sometimes she didn't even open one. She just sat near the window, sipping chai, watching the people pass by, and talking to Ayaan. They spoke about everything: books, movies, childhood stories, silly dreams, and even their favorite snacks. They laughed a lot. Sometimes for no reason at all. One afternoon, Ayaan found a small note tucked inside a poetry book. It was written in Zoya's neat handwriting. If I were a word, I'd sit quietly between your pages, hoping you'd read me again. He smiled, folded the note, and kept it in his pocket. The next day, he placed a note of his own inside another book she liked. If I were a book, I'd never end. Just to keep you turning my pages. Zoya found it and looked at him from across the room. She didn't say anything, just gave him a small smile and went back to reading. From then on, leaving notes became their thing. Hidden in books, slipped between pages, or stuck to the kettle. Little thoughts, silly poems, or even a favorite line from a movie. One day, Zoya brought a small speaker and played an old Hindi song in the shop. It was soft and beautiful, the kind of song that made you feel like you were dreaming. This is one of my favorites, she said. Ayaan listened quietly. I like it. It sounds like something that belongs in this shop. From then on, they started sharing songs. Ayaan made a playlist and named it 4 Rainy Days and Zoya. She laughed when she saw it but didn't change a thing. They also began writing silly poems together on the counter notebook. Nothing serious. Just fun verses like, there once was a girl who drank all my chai. Now I just make 2 without asking why. Or, this bookstore's got magic, I'm telling you true. I came in for shelter and somehow found you. Sometimes customers would read their notes and smile, not knowing who wrote them. But Ayaan and Zoya did, and that was enough. They never called their meetings dates. There were no declarations, no promises, and yet something deep was happening. Something real. It was slow and gentle, like rain falling on leaves. They didn't realize how much time they spent together, or how easily their days started to feel empty without each other. One evening, the power went out in the whole town. The shop was dark, lit only by the fading sunlight from the windows. Ayaan lit some candles and made chai on a small gas stove. Zoya sat on the floor with her back against a shelf, holding a candle like it was a treasure. "It feels like a scene from a movie," she said. "It does," Ayaan replied, handing her the tea. They sat there in the soft light, the world outside quiet and still. "Do you ever feel like this is all a dream?" Zoya asked suddenly. Ayaan looked at her. "Sometimes. But if it is, I hope I don't wake up." She looked at him, surprised by his words. Her eyes softened, and she nodded slightly. Then, without saying anything, she placed her hand near his on the floor. Not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth. He didn't move. Neither of them spoke for a while after that. The silence was not empty. It was full of something unspoken, something that didn't need words. After that evening, their bond only grew stronger. Zoya started helping around the shop. She would rearrange books, bring new ideas, suggest changes to the reading corner, and once even painted a small mural on the back wall, a girl sitting under a tree reading a book with the sky full of stars above her. "This is how I see this place," she said. "Peaceful, dreamy, full of quiet magic." Ayaan didn't know what to say. The mural felt like a gift. One morning, Ayaan found a wrapped package on the counter. Inside was a notebook. On the first page, Zoya had written, "Let's write our story here. 1 page every day. No rules. Just us." So they did. Every evening, one of them wrote something in the notebook. Sometimes a poem. Sometimes just a line. Sometimes a drawing or a list of things they wanted to do together, like visit a book fair or cook something new or watch a sunset from a rooftop. Their story began to live between those pages. Slowly, softly. One rainy afternoon, almost like the first day they met, Zoya walked in soaked again. This time, she didn't say anything. She just walked up to Ayaan and gave him a wet, laughing hug. "You should really keep an umbrella," he said, pretending to scold her. "Where's the fun in that?" she replied. They both laughed, standing there, not caring about the wet floor or her damp clothes. Later, while she dried off with a towel he kept behind the counter, she said, "You know, I didn't expect this." "Expect what?" Ayaan asked. "This. Us. I came here for a story. And now I think I'm living one." Ayaan looked at her, his eyes soft. "Me too." She reached into her bag and took out a book. It was a gift, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a ribbon. "I found this in another town a few days ago," she said. "I thought of you." He unwrapped it carefully. It was a rare poetry book, one he had been trying to find for years. He looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" She just smiled. "I listen." He felt a warmth spread through his chest. Not just because of the book, but because of what it meant. She had been thinking of him even when she wasn't here. That night, after she left, Ayaan sat in the quiet shop and opened their shared notebook. He wrote on a fresh page, "You walked in one day with rain in your hair. Now it feels like sunshine follows you everywhere. You came for shelter but stayed for more. And with you, Zoya, my little shop feels like home like never before." He closed the book, placed it on the shelf they had picked together, and looked out at the quiet street. He didn't know where this story was going. There were no plans, no labels. Just chai, books, poems, and her. And somehow that felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Ayaan was closing the shop when he saw a small note stuck to the door from the outside. It was folded carefully, the handwriting already familiar. He pulled it down, opened it, and smiled as he read the words. Asterisk were something warm. "I'm picking you up at 8. Trust me. Zoya asterisk." He glanced at his watch. It was already 7:30. Exactly at 8, her scooter pulled up outside. Zoya wore a dark jacket, her scarf wrapped around her neck, and a playful grin on her face. "You're late," she said. "I didn't know I had a date." "You don't," she replied. "You have a stargazing session." With chai. Ayaan laughed and climbed onto the scooter behind her. They rode through the sleepy town, past the narrow lanes and the quiet houses, heading out where the lights faded and the road grew quiet. The sky was already turning deep blue, and a few stars had started to appear. They reached a small hilltop just outside the town. It wasn't very high, but it gave a clear view of the sky above and the glowing town below. There was a little wooden bench and a tree with branches like open arms. Zoya had brought a flask of chai and 2 cups wrapped in cloth. They sat down, the night cool and still around them. The stars began to appear one by one, like shy friends slowly joining the party. "You come here often?" Ayaan asked, watching her pour the tea. "Sometimes," she said. "When I need to think. Or not think." He took a sip. Chai was sweet and warm, just the way he liked it. "You didn't bring any poetry?" he teased. Zoya looked up at the sky. "Tonight, the stars are enough." They sat in silence for a while, just watching the sky. A gentle breeze passed through the trees, making the leaves whisper softly. "Did you ever think about the stars when you were a kid?" she asked. Ayaan nodded. "I used to think each star was a wish someone made." "I used to think they were people watching us," Zoya said. "Like old souls." He looked at her. Her eyes were reflecting the starlight, and her smile was soft, almost dreamy. "What did you want to be when you were little?" she asked. "A librarian," he said, laughing. "I thought it would be nice to live inside stories." "You kind of did it," she said. "You built your own little world." He looked down at his cup. "What about you?" "I wanted to be a singer. Or a traveler. Or both," she said. But then life got loud and dreams became quiet. Ayaan didn't reply. He just listened. That's what Zoya liked about him. He never rushed to speak. He waited. And when he did speak, it always mattered. They finished their chai, and Zoya stretched out her legs, leaning back on her hands. "You know, people spend their whole lives looking for something that feels like this," she said. "Like what?" "This moment. The stars. Quiet. The company." Ayaan looked at her, really looked. The way her hair moved in the breeze, the soft laugh in her voice, the comfort in her presence. Something stirred inside him, not a loud thunder but a soft certainty. Like a page turning gently to a chapter you didn't know you were waiting for. He didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled out a small chocolate bar from his pocket. "You brought chocolate?" she laughed. "Always prepared." She broke off a piece and handed it to him. "You really are something else, Ayaan." The moon had risen now, casting a pale light over everything. The stars looked closer, like they were listening. Zoya leaned her head on his shoulder. "This feels like a dream," she said softly. "If it is," he whispered, "I don't want to wake up." She didn't move, didn't speak. Just rested there, as if that was exactly where she belonged. They stayed like that for a long time, talking, laughing, sharing bits of their past like pieces of a puzzle they were building together. Ayaan told her about his favorite childhood book, the one with pages falling apart but still his most treasured. Zoya shared how she once tried to run away to the mountains at age 10 with just a notebook and a packet of biscuits. By midnight, the air had grown colder, but neither of them wanted to leave. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't awkward, it was full. Full of things felt but not yet spoken. Zoya finally stood up and stretched. "We should go. Before the stars tell on us." Ayaan smiled and stood beside her. They packed up the cups and the flask. As she started the scooter, he hesitated for a moment. "Zoya," he said. She turned, her hair catching the moonlight. "Yes. Thank you for tonight." She gave him a small nod, her eyes searching his. "Thank you for coming with me." They didn't say more. They didn't need to. On the ride back, Ayaan sat quietly behind her, holding on gently. The road was empty, the town asleep, and the sky still glowing above. His heart felt full in a way it never had before. A feeling so quiet, so complete, it almost made him want to laugh. Back at the shop, she stopped the scooter. Neither of them moved for a moment. "I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked. "You always do," he replied. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, just a quick, soft touch, and then smiled as she drove away. Ayaan stood there for a moment, touching his cheek, smiling like a fool. Inside, the shop was quiet, but it felt warmer somehow. He went to their notebook and opened a fresh page. He wrote without thinking, just letting the words fall out. "Tonight I saw stars, not just in the sky, but in your eyes. The love is quiet, gentle, and kind. I think I finally understand it. And I think you might be the one I've been waiting for, asterisk." He closed the book and placed it carefully on the counter. Outside, the stars were still shining. And inside him, something had changed forever. Behind the bookstore, there was a forgotten backyard. It was messy and wild, filled with weeds, broken pots, and old wooden planks. Nobody had stepped there in years. Didn't look like much. But one day, Zoya stood at the back door, hands on her hips, looking at it like she saw something magical. "This place has potential," she said. Ayaan stood beside her, unsure. "It looks like a jungle." She grinned. "Exactly. We'll turn it into a secret garden." He raised an eyebrow. "We? Of course. What's love without a little dirt on your hands?" She winked, and just like that, their secret garden project began. Every morning before the bookstore opened and every evening after it closed, Zoya and Ayaan worked on the backyard. They pulled out weeds, cleared the broken things, and swept the dust. It wasn't easy. Sometimes they got scratches. Sometimes they laughed so hard they had to sit down. Sometimes they argued about where to place a pot, then ended up placing it somewhere else entirely. Zoya brought seeds, sunflowers, roses, daisies, and even some lavender. Ayaan found a few wooden crates from his storeroom, and together they painted them with silly designs and turned them into planters. Fairy lights were Zoya's idea. She hung them around the old fence and in the tree that stood proudly at one corner. At night, when the lights came on, the whole space looked like something out of a dream. Ayaan found an old bench in the bookstore's attic. It was dusty, wobbly, and forgotten like the garden. But Zoya insisted they fix it. "This bench is like us," she said, smiling. A little broken, but still full of stories. They spent an entire afternoon sanding it, painting it sky blue, and placing it right under the tree. It became their spot, the place where they sat, talked, read books, and sometimes just held hands in silence. One evening, the sun was setting, casting a golden light across the garden. Zoya sat on the bench, her legs folded under her, watching Ayaan water the plants. The air smelled of flowers and fresh soil. "You know," she said softly, "I never imagined love like this." Ayaan looked at her. "Like what?" "Like a garden. Something you build slowly. With care. With your hands, your time, your heart." He sat down beside her, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I always thought love was sudden. Like lightning. Quick and loud." Zoya smiled. "Ours isn't lightning. It's sunlight." They sat there, watching the garden come alive with evening light. The fairy lights blinked on and the flowers seemed to glow. Zoya leaned her head on Ayaan's shoulder. "Promise me something. Anything. Even when we grow old and grumpy, let's still come here. Sit on this bench. Hold hands. Talk nonsense." He wrapped his fingers around hers. "I promise." Days passed and their garden bloomed. People from the town started hearing about it. Some peeked in, others asked if they could help. But Zoya always said, "It's just for us." A little piece of magic hidden from the world. One day, Zoya brought a small wind chime. It had tiny glass pieces and soft bells that sang with the wind. She hung it on a branch above their bench. "This is the sound of our garden," she said. Another day, Ayaan brought an old radio. They played soft music while working, sometimes dancing between the flowers like children. Zoya once wore a flower crown she made herself, and Ayaan laughed so hard he nearly fell into a pot of marigolds. But the best moments were the quiet ones. Like when they sat under the tree on rainy days, wrapped in a blanket, sipping chai. Or when Ayaan read aloud from one of Zoya's favorite books and she closed her eyes just listening. Or the time she fell asleep on his shoulder, and he stayed perfectly still for an hour so she wouldn't wake up. Their love grew with the garden, slowly, gently, with every new leaf and flower. One night, they lit candles all around the garden. The stars were bright, the air cool, and everything was calm. Zoya wore a white dress. Ayaan wore his usual sweater. They sat on the bench, the candlelight flickering in their eyes. "I think," Zoya said, "this is the happiest I've ever been." Ayaan didn't say anything. He just looked at her, really looked, and realized how beautiful she was. Not just her face, but everything about her. The way she moved, the way she laughed, the way she made even the darkest corners bloom with light. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a simple sketch. It was their garden, drawn with pencil and love. The tree, the bench, the flowers, the lights, and two little figures sitting side by side. Zoya touched the drawing gently. "Did you draw this?" He nodded. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I wanted to keep this moment forever." She folded the sketch and tucked it into her dress pocket. Then she turned to him. "Ayaan." "Yes. I think I'm in love with you." He stared at her, heart pounding. "You think?" "I'm sure," she said, laughing. He laughed too and then pulled her close. No big speech. No loud confession. Just the kind of embrace that says everything without words. The wind chime played softly above them. From that day on, the garden became more than just a secret place. It became their world. A quiet world where love didn't shout but whispered. Where hearts didn't race, they bloomed. And in that quiet blooming, Zoya and Ayaan found something rare. A love that didn't need to be dramatic. Just real. Just theirs. Zoya had always loved to paint, but she never told many people about it. It was her quiet joy, something she did late at night when the world was asleep, when colors spoke louder than words. She kept her brushes and paints in a wooden box, hidden under her bed like a secret only the stars knew. One afternoon, while Ayaan was busy arranging new books in the shop, Zoya sat alone in the secret garden. The sunlight danced through the tree leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. She took out her sketchbook, turned to a fresh page, and began to draw. Her hand moved softly, carefully, as if trying not to wake a dream. She painted him. Not the perfect, serious version. No, this was her Ayaan, the one who smiled with his eyes, who had slightly messy hair and always wore that same warm sweater. She painted him sitting on their bench, holding a book in one hand and a cup of chai in the other, a quiet smile on his lips. And in the lower corner of the page, just above her name, she painted a tiny red heart, so small you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking very closely. It was her secret confession. She tore the page gently, placed it inside his favorite book, a well-worn poetry collection, and left it on the counter. Then she walked out with a soft smile on her lips, pretending like nothing happened. That evening, when Ayaan closed the bookstore, he found the book. Curious, he flipped it open and there it was, the portrait. His eyes widened. He stared at it for a long time. The details, the colors, the way his smile had been captured so gently. He touched the corner and saw the tiny heart. His fingers paused over it. His chest felt warm and full. He knew. The next day was quiet. Zoya came in like usual, laughing about the rain and bringing her favorite cookies. Ayaan didn't say anything about the painting. He wanted to, but his words stayed stuck in his throat. Instead, he just watched her, trying to find the right moment. Evening came. They sat in the garden. The air smelled like wet earth and jasmine. Zoya was humming a song under her breath, her hair tied up in a loose bun, a few strands falling across her cheek. Ayaan looked at her, heart thumping. "Zoya," he said softly. She looked up. "Hum." He took a deep breath, reached out and slowly, carefully held her hand. Her fingers didn't pull away. They fit perfectly in his. "I found the painting," he whispered. Her eyes widened just for a second, then softened. "There was a heart," he added, voice even lower now. "I know," she said with a tiny smile. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he let the words leave his heart. "I love you." It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, honest, like everything between them. Zoya didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Her smile said it all. "I know," she whispered, squeezing his hand. The fairy lights blinked on around them. The wind chimes sang a quiet tune. And in that moment, everything felt still, like the world had paused just for them. They sat there for a long time, hands entwined, hearts finally open. And somewhere in the corner of the garden, the tiny red heart in the painting smiled too. The idea started like all beautiful things do, quietly, gently, like a whisper between two hearts. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Zoya and Ayaan sat on their garden bench, sipping chai. The sky above was a soft blue, and a butterfly danced from flower to flower nearby. Zoya had her head on Ayaan's shoulder, and he had his hand wrapped around hers. "I was thinking," she said softly, almost like she was dreaming out loud. "What if we built something together?" Ayaan turned to look at her. "We already did," he said, motioning toward the garden. Zoya smiled. "Yes, but something more. What if we opened a little cafe? Just beside the bookstore. A place where people can come and feel like they're in a love story." Ayaan raised his eyebrows. "A love story cafe?" "Exactly," she nodded, eyes sparkling. "Books and chai, music and handwritten notes. A place full of warmth where people feel safe to fall in love." He didn't answer immediately, but she could already see the idea planting roots in his heart. The same way it had bloomed in hers. That night, they stayed up making plans on a napkin. It was messy, drawings of tables shaped like hearts, lists of cake flavors, notes about old records playing in the background. By morning, they were tired but smiling. The dream had taken shape. The shop next to the bookstore had been closed for years. It had cracked windows, peeling paint, and dust everywhere. Most people walked past it without even noticing. But Ayaan and Zoya looked at it with hearts full of hope. To them, it was a blank page waiting to be written on. They spent days cleaning it up. Zoya painted the walls soft colors, warm cream and pastel pink, while Ayaan built wooden shelves for mugs and jars. They filled the space with secondhand furniture, each piece chosen with care. A yellow couch that made you want to curl up with a book. A round table with mismatched chairs. Fairy lights strung across the ceiling like stars. They painted one wall with chalkboard paint and wrote on it, "Leave a note for someone you love." Soon people started writing. Some were short and sweet, "I miss you." Others were long letters, poems, doodles. One girl wrote, "I said yes," after her boyfriend proposed at their favorite table. A man left a letter every Sunday to his wife who had passed away, and Zoya always made sure it stayed up there. Ayaan brewed the chai, and Zoya baked cakes with rose petals and cardamom. They played old records, soft jazz, classic Bollywood songs, gentle love tunes that made people close their eyes and smile. There was always a candle burning near the window, its soft scent mixing with books and spices. The cafe didn't take long to become famous in the little town. People came not just for the chai or the books, but for the feeling. The moment you stepped in, it felt like a hug. Warm, safe, full of love. Couples started coming for their first dates. Elderly pairs held hands across the table. Friends laughed and shared secrets. And always, someone was reading, lost in a story while real stories were being written around them. Zoya made tiny handwritten menus with doodles and poetry in the corners. Ayaan added a shelf where people could leave letters for strangers. Letters to the unknown, they called it. Some were about heartbreak. Some were about hope. Some just said, "You're not alone." They didn't need a sign outside. People just knew. They called it the Dream Cafe, though the couple never gave it an official name. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, a young man stepped inside, drenched and nervous. He had a flower in one hand and a crumpled note in the other. Zoya noticed him pacing near the chalkboard wall. She walked over gently. "First time?" He nodded. "I wrote something. For someone. She used to come here, and I think she stopped because of me." Zoya smiled softly. "Write it again. This place has a way of fixing hearts." The boy pinned the note up. It read, "I'm sorry. I still think about you every time it rains." A week later, the girl came back. She sat at the same table, saw the note, and smiled with tears in her eyes. Love lived there. Meanwhile, Ayaan and Zoya worked side by side every day. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. But even in silence, there was music between them. Ayaan would glance up and find her tying her hair up with a pencil, smudges of flour on her cheek. She would catch him wiping the same spot on the counter twice because he was lost in thought. Every evening, they closed the cafe together, then walked hand in hand back to the garden. They sat on their bench under the fairy lights, talking about the day, sipping chai, and smiling at the magic they had built. One day, a writer visited. He had heard stories about the bookstore and the cafe. He spent hours watching the couple, the people, the notes. Before leaving, he told Ayaan, "You two are the town's love legend." Zoya laughed when she heard that. "Love legend," she teased. "We're just two people with too many books and too much chai." But Ayaan smiled, looking around the cafe filled with laughter and candlelight. Maybe that's all it takes. Town believed it. People said if you wanted to fall in love or fix a broken heart or just remember how beautiful the world could be, you had to visit the bookstore and the cafe beside it. Because in that little corner of the world, love wasn't just a feeling. It was a place. And Ayaan and Zoya, without ever trying, had made sure everyone who walked in felt it. Years passed, and the little bookstore and cafe continued to thrive, growing into something beyond their dreams. The town had changed in many ways, but the bookstore and its attached cafe remained a constant, a place where time seemed to slow down and people could forget the world outside. Its warm lights were a beacon for everyone who needed a little peace, a little love, and of course a little chai. Ayaan and Zoya had built a life there, and it was simple, content, and filled with quiet moments. The shop was their home, and every corner of it had a story. The shelves were worn from years of people picking up books, opening them, and leaving with new thoughts. The tables were scarred with old coffee rings and the occasional love note, left behind by visitors who had found themselves in the place they'd always been looking for. Each morning, Ayaan would open the bookstore doors. He'd stand there for a moment, breathing in the fresh air, listening to the quiet hum of the town waking up. He'd tie his apron around his waist, his hands moving with the same ease they'd had years ago when he first started. Zoya, always beside him, would wave at him from the cafe, her paintbrush in hand as she added another stroke to the new mural she was working on. Their days followed the same peaceful rhythm. Zoya painted. She always found new corners of the world to capture, creating scenes filled with color and light. The walls of the bookstore had slowly become a gallery, each piece telling a story, each brushstroke echoing the journey she had shared with Ayaan. She would pause every so often, watching the children's faces light up as they sat in the garden, listening to Ayaan read to them. He would sit on the soft grass, surrounded by a circle of little ones, each one hanging on his every word. His voice was warm and soothing, drawing them into the world of whatever story he was sharing that day. It had become a tradition for the children to gather every afternoon, eager for their story time. Ayaan didn't mind. He loved watching their eyes sparkle with wonder, their imaginations growing with every tale he told. Some days, Zoya would join them, sitting on the bench nearby, her hand resting on her lap as she added the finishing touches to her latest painting. Her presence was always quiet, but it was her presence that brought the garden to life. The flowers bloomed brighter when she was around, and the trees seemed to whisper with the wind. The bookstore cafe had become more than just a place for books or chai. It was a sanctuary, a home for anyone who needed a break from the hustle of life. People came from near and far, not only for the warmth of the drinks but for the warmth of the space itself. The old records played softly in the background, filling the air with a timeless feel. The scent of fresh bread, cinnamon, and freshly brewed chai mixed with the comforting scent of old books, creating a perfect harmony. Ayaan and Zoya had no need for grand gestures or dramatic moments. Their love was quiet, steady, and true. There were no big celebrations, no declarations of love in front of crowds. Instead, there were small moments, Zoya quietly painting as Ayaan prepared the chai. Ayaan reading aloud to the children, his eyes flickering toward Zoya as she smiled softly at him. A shared look, a gentle touch. Their love was in the small, everyday things, in the way they understood each other without speaking, in the way their hands naturally found each other as they worked side by side. Some days, the cafe was bustling, full of people chatting over cups of chai, leaving behind little notes or poems. Other days, it was quiet, with only the soft rustling of pages as a few visitors sat with their books and chai. No matter the day, Ayaan and Zoya knew they had found something rare, peace. Peace that came from knowing that they had built this life together, a life filled with love and creativity, with books and chai, with laughter and dreams. There were no more questions, no more wondering what the future would bring. Their future was already here, woven into the very walls of the bookstore and cafe. It was in the way Zoya's paintings brightened the space, in the way Ayaan's voice brought stories to life. It was in the quiet moments they shared every evening, when they closed the cafe together and walked hand in hand back to their little garden, the same bench where they had first confessed their love so many years ago. They would sit there, watching the stars, holding hands, content in the simple beauty of the life they had created. One evening, as the sun began to set and the stars started to appear, a young couple walked into the cafe. They were shy, nervous, and clearly in the early stages of their relationship. They ordered chai and sat at one of the small tables by the window, exchanging soft smiles. Ayaan watched them for a moment, a small smile playing on his lips before turning to Zoya. "Do you think they'll leave a note?" he asked, his voice filled with warmth. Zoya glanced over at the couple, her eyes gentle. "They might. This place has a way of making people want to share their hearts." Ayaan nodded, feeling a quiet pride in his chest. "It's a good place for that." Zoya smiled and stood up, walking over to the counter. She returned with 2 cups of chai and set them down beside him. He looked up at her, his eyes full of affection. "No matter what happens in the world," he said softly, "this is enough for me." "You're enough." Zoya smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you are more than enough for me." They sat there in silence, sipping their chai, the sound of the old record playing softly in the background. The world outside moved on, but in their little corner of the world, time seemed to stand still. They had found their rhythm, their peace, their ever after. Cafe continued to thrive, a place where people found love, warmth, and comfort. It became a part of the town's heart, as much a part of its history as anything else. And Ayaan and Zoya, with their quiet love, their shared dreams, and their endless cups of chai, were its heartbeats.